Zarel stood at the center of the Galactic Council's chamber, their voice echoing against the cold metal walls, carrying the weight of impending doom. Esteemed members, we stand on a precipice. To wage war against humanity is to invite an eternal vendetta. They are not merely survivors, they are relentless pursuers who thrive in adversity. Across from Zarel, General Craxus of the Jornax Federation scoffed, his mandibles twitching in irritation. Your fears are overstated, Corvidarian. Humans are primitive. Their division makes them weak. This council should not falter before a race that has barely stepped into the cosmos. Division, General Craxus, is exactly why they are formidable, Zarel countered. Their history is a tapestry of overcoming divides. Each time they unify against a common enemy, their potential multiplies. Underestimate that at your peril. The chamber buzzed with murmurs from hundreds of delegates, their hues and forms a mosaic of the galaxy's diversity. Zarel sensed the shifting sentiments, the fear, curiosity, and arrogance mingling in the air. Zarel speaks truth, a voice cut through the chatter. It was Ambassador Thale from the aquatic planet of Hydrax. My people have traded with humans. They adapt, they learn, and most crucially, they do not forget. An attack on them would be remembered, and avenged. General Craxus rose, towering over most in the chamber. This council was not established to bow to fear. We are the apex of civilization. A preemptive strike will ensure no future threat from humanity. Zarel looked around, meeting the eyes of the undecided. To attack without provocation is to act out of fear, not strength. We ignite a war we do not need, against a species that could be our ally. Consider the consequences, not just immediate gains. The debate raged on, with each side presenting its argument. Zarel knew that their words were making some reconsider, yet the thirst for expansion, for resources that Earth's colonies unknowingly sat upon, was a strong lure for many. As the council prepared to vote, Zarel sent a silent plea to the cosmos, hoping reason would prevail. The votes came in rapidly, displayed above for all to see. Zarel's heart sank as the majority favored engagement. The decision was made. War was imminent. In the days that followed, Zarel worked quietly, reaching out to their human contacts, warning them discreetly of what was to come. They knew well the devastation this conflict would bring. On Earth's colonies, the night sky, which had once offered the promise of infinite possibilities, now bore the imminent threat of invasion. The first strikes were devastating. Orbital bombardments on outer colonies like New Haven and Terra Nova sent shockwaves through human space. The Galactic Council's forces, led by General Craxus, expected quick surrender. They were not prepared for the guerrilla resistance that met them at every turn. Humans, united by the external threat, fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that stunned their attackers. Sabotage, hit-and-run tactics, and deep space ambushes, humans used their intimate knowledge of their colonized worlds to great effect. Among them, Captain Alara Miles emerged as a leader. A former pilot with experience in asteroid mining operations, she used her knowledge to convert civilian ships into war vessels, equipping them with improvised weapons. Every ship, every pilot, every hand is needed, Captain Miles addressed her makeshift fleet. We are outnumbered but not outsmarted. We fight not just for survival, but for our right to exist freely in this galaxy. Back on the council station, Zarel monitored the progress of the war, their heart heavy with each report of loss and destruction. They knew it was time to act, not just as a diplomat, but as someone who believed in a greater good beyond the council's ambitions. Using their access to classified information, Zarel began to leak strategic data to the human resistance. Each piece of intelligence was carefully chosen, calculated to cause disruption without costing lives unnecessarily. The war continued, weeks turning into months. Human resilience turned the tide slowly, their forces becoming more coordinated and effective. The Galactic Council, initially confident, grew increasingly frustrated. Supply lines were cut, strategic bases were lost, and the human slogan, "They will hunt you forever," became a chilling reality for many alien soldiers. Amidst this, Zarel's actions did not go unnoticed. suspicions arose, and it wasn't long before they were summoned by General Craxus. You have been a staunch advocate for peace, Zarel. Yet, there are whispers that you sympathize too deeply with our foes. Your actions suggest possible treason. Craxus's voice was low, threatening. Zarel met his gaze, their own unflinching. General, my actions are driven by a desire to see this council lead wisely, not into endless conflict. We must seek peace, or this war will consume us all. Craxus considered this, his expression unreadable. Be warned, diplomat. Should evidence arise of your betrayal, not even your esteemed position will save you from the consequences. As Zarel left the meeting, they knew the risk had grown exponentially. Yet, there was no turning back. They had chosen their path, one that sought to end the conflict, hopefully leading to a lasting peace, if they could live long enough to see it. Zarel's warnings faded into echoes as the council chambers emptied, the decision casting a long shadow over their thoughts. The war had begun not with a declaration, but with a silent nod among the galaxy's most powerful. The Corvidarian diplomat watched the departure of the delegates, their shapes and colors blurring together, a muddled testament to the council's diversity and its divisiveness. The first reports of the council's initial strikes on human outposts arrived soon after. The colonies of New Haven and Terra Nova were in chaos, their skies lit with the fire of orbital bombardments. Despite the devastation, the human response was swift and ferocious, defying the council's expectations of easy submission. Captain Alara Miles stood amid the rubble of what was once the command center on New Haven, her uniform marked with ash and determination. Regroup at Rally Point Delta, she commanded through her communicator, her voice steady despite the crackling static. We'll make them pay for every inch of our soil they dare to touch. The human resistance was ragtag but resourceful, pulling together civilians and military personnel alike. Alara's leadership galvanized the people, her strategy shaped by a deep understanding of her home and its tactical value. Hidden weapon caches, secret tunnels, and an intimate knowledge of the terrain became the cornerstone of their defense. Meanwhile, Zarel navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the council station, their mind racing with strategies and contingencies. The Corvidarian knew that their next steps would tread a thin line between diplomacy and subterfuge. Using their clearance, Zarel accessed confidential communications, piecing together the council's battle plans. Each detail, each troop movement was a puzzle piece in the larger scheme that Zarel hoped to disrupt. In the shadowed corners of the station's archives, Zarel met secretly with Anara, a fellow diplomat and one of the few who shared their doubts about the war. I've secured the information. It's enough to throw their next offensive into disarray, Zarel whispered, handing over a data chip discreetly. Anara's eyes widened slightly, a ripple in her otherwise calm demeanor. You're taking a great risk, Zara. If they find out. They won't. Not until it's too late, Zarel replied, their voice a blend of hope and fear. This is the only way to save both our races from annihilation. The data made its way to the humans through a series of covert exchanges, each step fraught with danger but necessary. On Earth, the information allowed the human forces to preemptively strike a council supply convoy, turning the tide momentarily in their favor. Back on the battlefield, Alara coordinated the attacks from a hidden command post, her face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. Hit them now, while they're reeling, she instructed her unit leaders, her command carrying through the encrypted channels. The operation was a success, with minimal casualties on the human side and maximum damage to the enemy. But with each victory came the shadow of retaliation. The Council's forces doubled their efforts, deploying more troops and deadlier technology. Each day brought with it a heavier cost, and the human colonies bore the brunt of the Council's wrath. Zarel watched the casualty reports with a heavy heart, each number a stark reminder of the war's brutal reality. In the Council's war room, General Craxus presided over the battle plans, his confidence unshaken by the setbacks. Increase the pressure. Remind them why they fear the Council, he ordered, his voice void of compassion. The war dragged on, days bleeding into nights with no respite. Both sides were locked in a deadly embrace, a dance of destruction that threatened to consume them all. Zarel continued their clandestine support, each move more daring than the last. One evening, under the guise of routine maintenance, Zarel accessed a secure communication channel, sending a burst transmission to the human forces. The message contained the coordinates of the Council's main munitions depot. It was an act of betrayal, but to Zarel, it was a necessary sacrifice for peace. The humans seized the opportunity, launching a covert operation that resulted in the destruction of the depot. The explosion was a blow to the Council's logistics, setting back their war efforts significantly. In the chaos, Zarel's role remained undetected, but the stakes were higher than ever. Elara, receiving the news of the successful mission, allowed herself a rare smile. "This is for New Haven," she whispered to herself, a silent vow to continue fighting, to keep pushing until the Council acknowledged their right to exist as equals in the galaxy. As the war continued, both sides suffered immense losses, but the human spirit, bolstered by Zarel's aid, refused to break. The Council, once a symbol of unity and power, began to show cracks, the strain of the prolonged conflict exposing old rivalries and new weaknesses. Amidst the turmoil, Zarel prepared for the inevitable. Sooner or later, their actions would come to light, and the consequences would be dire. But for a chance at peace, for a future where both humans and aliens could share the stars, any price was worth paying. As the war waged on, both humanity and the Galactic Council realized the stakes were much higher than mere territorial disputes or political dominance. It was now a battle for survival. Captain Elara Miles leaned over the tactical map spread across the table in her makeshift bunker, her eyes scanning the lines and dots that represented troops and battles. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Harrow, stood beside her, watching closely. "We've got Council forces moving through the Orion sector. It's a feint. They want to draw us out," Elara analyzed, pointing at the flickering hologram. Harrow nodded, understanding the tactic. "And our response? We hold. Then, we hit them where they least expect it. Prepare the Ghost Squadron. It's time they lived up to their name." Meanwhile, Zarel, cloaked in the anonymity of their diplomatic status, continued to maneuver through the political minefield that the Galactic Council had become. Corridors once filled with the hum of cooperative dialogue now echoed with hurried, hushed conversations and the metallic clank of armed escorts. In these trying times, Zarel met with Ambassador Thale, a trusted ally from the aquatic planet Hydrax. "I have more information, Thale. It's risky, but it could turn the tide in favor of a ceasefire," Zarel whispered, passing a small data disk across the table. Thale accepted it with a nod, her gills flaring slightly in anxiety. "You're playing a dangerous game, Zara. If they discover your involvement." "They won't. Not until we're ready to make our move," Zarel assured, though their heart fluttered with uncertainty. The information was crucial, detailing the Council's plans to deploy a new weapon capable of decimating large fleets with minimal effort. Knowing the catastrophic potential, Elara and her team prepared a daring counter-operation. Under the cloak of nebulae and cosmic dust, Ghost Squadron deployed silent runners, ships equipped with stealth technology, to infiltrate and sabotage the weapon before its activation. Back on the Galactic Council's space station, General Craxus convened an emergency meeting with his top advisors. The war had drained their resources and morale, but he was not ready to concede defeat. "We must crush their spirit once and for all," Craxus declared, slamming his fist onto the table. "Deploy the weapon. Let them witness the might of the Council." As the Council moved forward with their plans, the Ghost Squadron reached the weapon's base, a massive structure floating in the void of space, shielded and heavily guarded. With precision and stealth, the squadron navigated through the defenses, planting charges and hacking systems to disrupt the weapon's core. Elara monitored the mission from her bunker, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. The success of this mission was critical. Not just for the battle, but for the war. As the final charge was set, her communicator crackled to life. "Charge set. We're clear. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space but bright enough to light up the sector. The weapon, designed to end battles, was no more. Cheers erupted in the bunker, a rare sound of victory that bolstered the spirits of the weary soldiers. On the Council's space station, the news of the weapon's destruction hit like a physical blow. General Craxus faced the Council, his features hard with fury and defeat. The weapon was their last best hope, and its loss signaled a turning point in the war. Zarel, watching from the sidelines, knew this was the moment to push for peace. With several members of the Council now doubting the war's viability, Zarel approached the Assembly with a proposal for ceasefire negotiations. Members of the Council, this war has brought nothing but devastation to all involved. It is time to consider peace. We have seen enough of death and destruction. Whispers filled the chamber, many agreeing, others hesitant but curious. The shift in sentiment was palpable, the desire for peace mingling with the fear of further losses. As the Council debated the proposal, Zarel met privately with General Craxus, appealing to his sense of legacy and leadership. "General, you can end this now. Be the leader who chose peace over endless war. History will remember your decision." Craxus, his pride wounded but his pragmatism intact, finally nodded. "Arrange the negotiations. Let us see if humanity is as eager for peace as we are." The ceasefire talks were scheduled, a neutral planet chosen as the meeting ground. Elara, chosen to represent humanity, stood across from General Craxus, the weight of her world on her shoulders. "This ceasefire is the first step," Elara began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "But it must lead to lasting peace. We've all lost too much to settle for less." Craxus, his demeanor softened by the recent events, agreed. "Peace will require concessions from both sides. We are prepared to make them if you are." The negotiations stretched into hours, then days. Slowly, a treaty began to take shape, one that recognized the sovereignty of human colonies and promised the withdrawal of Council forces. As the final agreement was signed, Zarel felt a surge of relief and hope. Their actions, driven by a belief in the power of empathy and peace, had helped steer their galaxy back from the brink of destruction. The war was over, but the true challenge of rebuilding would soon begin. Zarel knew this peace was fragile, but it was a start, a chance to heal and grow stronger together. The future was uncertain, yet for the first time in a long time, it was filled with the possibility of harmony among the stars. The Council chamber was a cauldron of tension as Zarel, with a stoic expression, presented the latest surveillance data. "These movements suggest a build-up to a full-scale assault within the next standard cycle," they noted, the gravity of the situation evident in their voice. General Craxus, who was presiding over the assembly, nodded grimly. "We must make a decisive move," he declared, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. "We will bring the human territories to heel once and for all." Zarel's heart sank at the words. They knew this would lead to unnecessary bloodshed and a potential galactic quagmire. After the meeting, Zarel approached Craxus privately. "General, might I suggest an alternative approach? One that could ensure our dominance without extensive conflict?" Craxus eyed them skeptically. "I'm listening," he muttered, folding his arms. "Let us invite their leaders for a parley on neutral ground. Show them the might of the Council, yes, but also extend the hand of peace. We could secure a surrender without firing another shot," Zarel proposed, their tone measured and convincing. Craxus considered this for a moment, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, he nodded. "Arrange it. But this is your responsibility. If it fails, it's on your head." Zarel bowed slightly. "Understood, General." As Zarel left the room, they sent a secure message to Captain Elara Miles, informing her of the Council's plans and their own intentions. "This is our chance to shift the balance," they wrote. "Prepare to negotiate, but also prepare for the possibility of deceit." Back on Earth, Elara received the message with mixed feelings. Trusting the Council was risky, but if there was a chance for peace, she had to take it. She replied to Zarel, "We'll be ready. Both for peace and for what might follow." The negotiations were set on the neutral moon of Pelion, a barren rock that served as a frequent meeting place for interstellar diplomacy. the human delegation arrived under a banner of truce, escorted by a small security detail. Elara led the group, her posture rigid, her eyes alert. As both delegations faced each other across a long, metallic table, Zarel opened the talks. "We are here not to dictate terms but to discuss a possible future of coexistence. The Council does not wish to destroy, but to integrate and prosper together." Craxus watched silently, his expression unreadable. Elara responded coolly, "Humanity has thrived on autonomy. We can talk about integration, but not at the cost of our sovereignty." The negotiations were tense, with both sides presenting their demands and counter-demands. Zarel mediated skillfully, bridging gaps when they seemed insurmountable. As the hours passed, a draft treaty began to take shape. Just as it seemed that an agreement might be reached, a council aide rushed in with a message for Craxus. His face hardened as he read the contents. "It seems we have a problem," he announced, standing abruptly. "Our security forces have detected an attack on one of our strategic bases, a base that was, according to our intelligence, unmanned and unknown to humans." Suspicion flashed in Alara's eyes. "This isn't our doing," she stated firmly. "We came here in good faith." Craxus's gaze was icy as he turned to Zarel. "And you? You knew of this base. Did your good faith involve a knife in our back?" Zarel remained calm, their mind racing. "General, I assure you, I am here to seek peace. This must be a misunderstanding." Craxus did not seem convinced. He turned to his guards. "Detain them. All of them. Until we sort this out." Panic rose briefly in Alara's throat, but she suppressed it, signaling subtly to her team. This was what they had prepared for. As the council guards approached, Elara and her team sprang into action, not to fight but to execute a planned retreat. Smoke bombs obscured vision, and a sudden, intense electronic jamming disrupted communications temporarily. Zarel, in the midst of the chaos, found themselves torn. Their next actions could either salvage or doom the fragile peace. Making a split-second decision, they spoke into their hidden communicator. "Activate Plan B," they commanded. Outside, a human stealth ship, which had been on standby in case the talks failed, moved into position. Its mission was not to attack but to extract the human delegation safely. Elara and her team fought their way to the extraction point, where the stealth ship quickly scooped them up. As they made their escape, Elara looked back at the moon, where Zarel stood alone, a solitary figure against the backdrop of rising tensions. "Thank you, Zarel," she murmured, knowing the diplomat had just sacrificed their standing with the council to help humanity. Back at the council, Craxus was furious, but Zarel faced him with an unwavering calm. "You wanted to know humanity's strength," they said. "It's not just in their weapons, but in their will to survive and fight for what they believe is right. We could learn much from them." Craxus stared at them, a mix of anger and reluctant respect in his eyes. "Perhaps," he conceded grudgingly. "But this isn't over." As Zarel was escorted away, they knew their journey was far from done. They had chosen their path, one that might lead to peace, or perhaps to personal ruin. But for the sake of both their peoples, they hoped the seeds of understanding they had planted would someday bear fruit. As the dust settled on the moon of Pelion, Zarel stood alone, their figure outlined against the dim light of the departing human ship. The chaos of the failed negotiations still echoed in their mind, each moment replaying with the clarity of remorse and resolve. They knew the risks were immense, yet their path had never seemed clearer. It was not just a bridge they sought to build but a whole new world, one where understanding and respect could replace suspicion and hostility. Back at the council's main station, General Craxus paced the command center, his frustration palpable. "They played us," he growled, turning to his advisors. "Zarel, they played a part in this too. I want them watched. No more slip-ups. We tighten security, and we prepare for the worst." Zarel, under close surveillance, returned to their quarters, their mind racing with strategies and contingencies. They initiated a private communication to a trusted confidant within the council. "It's time to accelerate our plans," they said, their voice steady despite the weight of recent events. We can't afford to wait. If we are to end this, it must be now. Across the galaxy, Illyra and her team regrouped aboard their command ship, the atmosphere tense but determined. They underestimated us, Illyra mused aloud, her gaze fixed on the star-strewn void outside. But this is far from over. We need to be ready for what comes next. Her communications officer interrupted, "Captain, we've received a message from Zarel. They're asking for a meeting, somewhere secret. They say it's urgent." Illyra paused, weighing the risks. "Set the coordinates. We'll hear them out." The secret meeting took place on a desolate asteroid, far from prying eyes and sensors. Zarel arrived with data that could change the course of the conflict, a list of council members who might be swayed to support a ceasefire. "As much as the council wields power, it's fractured," Zarel explained. "There are those who seek peace, who fear this war will lead us to ruin. We must unite them, turn the tide from within." Illyra nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. "And the general?" she asked. "Craxus is a warrior," Zarel responded. "He will not bend, but he can be outmaneuvered. We need to present a united front, a coalition strong enough to challenge his agenda." Together, they crafted a plan, one that involved discreet alliances and strategic reveals of corruption within the council's ranks. The following weeks were a blur of activity, with Zarel working tirelessly to rally support, while Illyra prepared her forces for any possible outcome. Meanwhile, General Craxus sensed the shifting currents, his paranoia growing. "Increase surveillance on all members," he ordered. "I want to know who meets whom, who talks to whom. If Zarel thinks they can turn the council against me, they are sorely mistaken." But the seeds of dissent had already been sown. One by one, council members began to voice their concerns, their fears of a never-ending war draining their resources and their will. The council chamber, once a place of unified authority, became a stage for heated debates and calls for peace. Zarel, standing once again before the council, delivered a passionate plea. "We have fought long and hard," they declared, "but to what end? Our people suffer, our resources dwindle. Peace is not merely a necessity, it is the only path forward." The momentum was palpable, and as the vote was called, the council was divided. But this time, the scales tipped in favor of ceasefire. Craxus, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, had no choice but to agree. In the days that followed, a formal peace treaty was negotiated, involving representatives from both human territories and the council races. The treaty signing was broadcast across the galaxy, a symbol of hope and a testament to the power of diplomacy. Illyra and Zarel stood side by side as the documents were signed, their earlier trials forging a bond of mutual respect and understanding. "This is just the beginning," Illyra said, her voice imbued with a cautious optimism. Zarel smiled, their gaze taking in the assembly. "A beginning, yes," they agreed. "But one that promises a future where we stand together, not as enemies, but as allies." As the celebrations ensued, Zarel felt a profound sense of accomplishment and relief. They had navigated the treacherous waters of politics and war, not with weapons, but with words and will. And while the peace was fragile, it was a canvas upon which a new era could be painted. An era where humanity and the council could explore the stars not as conquerors, but as explorers, not as rulers, but as partners. In the quiet that followed the ceremony, Zarel looked out at the stars, their light undimmed by the darkness of space. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always a light waiting to be seen, a peace waiting to be made. And for now, that was enough.